So just tell us in general about the exhibit coming up at the Punk Rock Museum.
So the exhibit at the Punk Rock Museum is called Black Punk Now, taken from the book that is coming out, which is an anthology of Black punk writers. It's a celebration of Black punks for the last 20 years. Some of the focus is on the early years of Afro-Punk when I was putting on events surrounding the Afro-Punk documentary, or supporting the Afro-Punk documentary, uh, and inadvertently cultivating a scene in the community within New York. The other part of the exhibit is a celebration of today's Black and POC punk festivals and collectives that are kind of picking up where I left off with Afro-Punk prior to building up that as a brand. In essence, you've got a lot of photos, a lot of flyers, and kind of ephemera, really centering the Black punk experience for the last 20 years.
Black Punk Now, that's coming out in October.
Black Punk Now, it's an anthology of Black punk writers, fiction, nonfiction, and comics. I did like over 40 illustrations where I'm like illustrate each author, and scenes, like our chapter markers and stuff. You know, I think our purpose was push the conversation of the Black punk experience beyond Afro-Punk or Bad Brains.
What was the interaction between you and New York?
I found punk in Southern California. That's what my book, The High Desert, is all about. It was a small town filled with Nazis. It was like very volatile. And, you know, I had fear just for being a person of color in this small, very like outwardly racist punk community. When I was 15, we moved to New York. All of a sudden that went away. You know, it was just like, I never heard anything about Nazis again. The scene there is very diverse in every way you can think of, but scenes are very reflective of the community that they come from. New York in the 90s was like a very hard place to live. Every show felt like there was a fight. So I ended up, by senior year, finding out about shows in the tri-state area, up to Boston, down to DC. And I was gone every weekend. Like, you know, Friday after school, I'd drop my backpack and get on the bus or the train to some suburb to go to that scene, because it was more political and more DIY and more positive. It was also very white. And it was that there was a sacrifice there, kind of a Goldilocks situation, trying to find my perfect punk scene, which I never really did. It wasn't until the Afro-Punk documentary to be like, oh, wait, we can like build our own scene. That sentence, punk rock is Black music, is something that I sign most of my books with. It's like a message I want to like people to walk away with. It came kind of by accident from in my documentary. There were two different people who said those exact words. And it was like, wow, what a statement, you know? People from all backgrounds need to be reminded that all of this music that we listen to, like all of pop music, is Black music. Just because something is like co-opted or gentrified or reinterpreted or borrowed doesn't change that fast. I mean, you can go as far as being like Screwdriver, a white power band, is Black music, you know, because they're not like doing river dance, you know, like they're not playing European classical, like they're playing rock and roll, you know. So as long as we can remember that, it always gives honor and pays tribute to the people who gifted America and the world with this expression.
What's the sort of major developments that you've seen change over the past couple decades?
When I look at the stuff that makes me excited about what the kids are doing today, most of my favorite bands are female fronted. Most of them are a female person of color. There's like no shortage of queer bands, you know, like I feel like that's what's the exciting stuff. But when I was coming up in the 90s, I felt like being a person of color, and unless there's a woman in the scene, it was like you're here, but you don't have to like blast it, right? So you didn't find a lot of Black fronted bands that where the singer talked about being Black. It was kind of like, I'm Black, yes, but like let's not focus on that. So now I feel like you've got these groups like Zulu or Soul Glow that are like so unapologetically Black. You know, it's like we are just flaunting our Blackness in our varied ways. And if you're coming to our shows, like you better be down with that. I see the same thing with queer fronted bands and woman fronted bands. It's just not we don't have to hide anymore. I'm really excited about where punk is headed.
Not to sound like a reporter from the 1950s, but like, how do you think the youth is embracing punk rock today? Is it the same as when we were kids, you think, or what have you noticed that's changed?
Having gone through that whole period of like Warped Tour and you know, just the kind of commercialization of punk, where punk is now have gold records and all that kind of stuff, and then to see that go away, I could see the argument for somebody who's maybe 10 years younger to me to be like, oh yeah, punk is dead. Their vision of it is that like it's just this massive thing, you know? Because I'm fortunate enough to know about like the real underground scenes and or was part of the scene before that stuff happened, I also like recognize that it just kind of looks a lot more like what it looked like before punk broke, you know? And the beautiful thing about the underground is that you don't need a lot of people, you know? It's actually better when there's not a lot of people. So when I think about like some of my most memorable shows, like ever, it was like 200 people max, you know, stuffed into a barn.